Hawaiian quilting. Hawaiian quilting is said to have started when the wives of two chiefs were introduced to quilting by missionaries on board a boat. Hawaiians would not naturally have begun to quilt for domestic use, as quilts were not needed in the warm Hawaiian climate. The missionaries showed the Hawaiians how to cut up fabrics into pieces and then sew them back together. This the Hawaiians found rather wasteful, as they were careful with all their resources and didn't understand the concept of cutting up a large piece of material, only to sew pieces of it back together, and then be left with bits that couldn't be used. Eventually, the Hawaiians found a way of using their own clothing fabric, called tapa, which they folded to achieve 1/4 or 1/8 patterns, and they gave any waste pieces back to the missionaries for them to use in their own quilting. This tapa was from tree bark. The unique nature of the Hawaiian quilting is clear in their use of local flora and the spirit world as design influences for their quilts. Conceptually, they used quilts to record their environment, their departed loved ones, and their still to be born. Their quilts were also strongly about the Hawaiian identity and the identity of the individual members of their society. The Hawaiian gods, their rites and ceremonies, and their history are all depicted in the wonderful Hawaiian quilts. Local events and major historical events were all beautifully detailed and preserved in their quilts. In fact, all their quilts have a story to tell or a person to describe, or an act to preserve for posterity. Quilts were not made in Hawaii just to keep the women busy or as a necessary domestic duty. Quilts in Hawaii are their history, and they predict the future too. One of the few nations to produce famous quilts that were never intended to keep them warm at night, the Hawaiian culture and history have instead been retained beautifully. Quilts continue to be made in Hawaii, with new designs constantly emerging. Here, quilts are both the history and the future in a very unique and valuable way. Thank you for watching another Unstoppable Intellect video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to help keep the channel growing. Knowledge is power. Together, we'll make you truly unstoppable.